name's Kyle Cozad. I am currently the President and Chief Executive Officer at the Naval Aviation Museum Foundation.
Hi, I'm Jon Fay. Just recently was the Executive Officer for the 2022 and 2023 Blue Angels, and I currently serve as the Director for the Blue Angels Association, and I'm a retiring Naval Officer.
I'm Bob Galloway. I'm a currently retired Naval Officer. First of all, it's a privilege to be here with you gentlemen, but I retired Naval Officer, did most of my time in P3s, and then I taught school for 16 years doing junior ROTC.
Yeah, I'm the old guy. So I did 35 years in uniform, and I was fortunate. Most of that was spent, with proximity to a cockpit. So, commanded 4 or 5 different times. 3 of those times were, focused on P3s and P8s in the new Triton unmanned vehicle. But, tons of great memories. And, I was one of those guys who went through flight school, graduated from the Naval Academy, Top Gun, Top Gun, Top Gun. That's what I want to do. And I got here and, NAMI said, well, not so fast, tall guy. And it's not so much about how tall you are, but it's about, where you measure. And I've got a weird butt to knee length that disqualified me from flying jets. So it was a pretty easy fallback to say, well, that big thing that, lands on shore stations every night doesn't seem like such a bad idea. So I was very fortunate, have been stationed in each of the 4 major sites throughout my career, got to fly, the Canadian version of the P3, the CP140, and, become joint qualified without really getting a qualification. So I was blessed throughout my career and, lots of great memories and, some neat sea stories to pass along.
Well, I've been on a Canadian P3 once, Admiral, and I've never thrown up in an aircraft. And I almost threw up in that one because they fed me so much food before we took off. I mean, they had pies and cakes and all kind of stuff come on there. So it was an experience to be on a Canadian.
Yeah, the lack of food, if they don't show up with your rations for a flight, that's abort criteria. And I wish I was joking, but I'm not. They will delay takeoff. They will do everything, that they possibly can until that ration truck shows up. But it's good. It's good.
Well, in the B mod, we had rations, but you could bring it up in one little case. But this one, no, they had food coming from everywhere.
Yeah,
they had a truck to bring it in.
We got spoiled.
As long as they weren't serving the moose milk or any Labatt's Blue
no,
at that point, right?
The French had a reputation for doing that while they were flying, but certainly not the Canadians. I can remember everybody gives P3 guys crap for per diem. The very first trip I went on with the Canadian Air Force, we're flying over the Atlantic, and you hit your equal time point, and you hear an announcement over the PA, the bank is open. And what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Because I'm sitting there going, okay, I got to keep my receipts. And with the Canadians, you went to the back of the airplane and they handed you a stack of $20 bills, American bills, and that was yours for the rest of the trip. You didn't have to show receipts, and it was pretty generous to be able to work your way through a deployment, as they called it, that typically lasts a couple weeks. So
wow.
I might have gotten a little soft there during that tour.
Yeah. So I was originally an S3 guy, and truth be told, P3s were my first choice out of flight school, and I didn't get it. And to any flight students out there, it all works out for a reason. I truly believe that. I have a whole career of that being, the mantra. I'm incredibly thankful, for that. I love the S3. Had a great community, great time serving, and then had the opportunity to, with the sundown transition, to be thrown kind of a life raft and go to something else. And lucky enough that the P3 community finally drafted me into its ranks. And I got to go to Whidbey Island, Washington, and fly there, and then in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii as well. And just, I think to just be, given that opportunity to go and excel, I had the opportunity to qualify really fast, faster than my peer group, showing up, and get to instruct and serve as a mission commander and just do some great things. It was a lot of fun and, a rewarding mission. We were talking earlier. I'm kind of jealous of your experiences with, ASW, the anti-submarine warfare mission, because I always felt that was like a game of chess. And,
yeah.
During our time, this is probably, between 2007 to 2015 were most of my P3 experience. And, we had a couple different conflicts in parts of the world we were serving in, but that was still kind of the bread and butter, but there was also a need from the combatant commanders to do a lot of intelligence work, kind of the cop in the middle of the night, with the dirty mustache, drinking coffee at about 3 a.m, surveilling a specific target and providing that much needed intel. Hard to get the immediate gratuity, kind of that feedback out of it, but, valuable nonetheless.
Yeah. It's interesting during that time, when I started out, the height of the Cold War, and here I am, a brand new, Lieutenant JG squadron, showing up at the squadron around the very first day. First flight I go out on, we're flying on a Russian Victor III, submarine, and we're up at 18,000 feet, dropping sonobuoys, and I mean, you were doing real world stuff, and I would get my various upgrade flights signed off flying on real Soviet submarines, and so it was pretty cool. And the thing that stands out to me now, and as I kind of grew up through the ranks, is with the S3 gone, there are only 2 platforms that do anti-submarine warfare. The P3, which turned into the P8, and then the MH-60 Romeo. And so, it's an important game. And whenever I was in command, I focused on the fact that, we're the only game in town when it comes to long-range anti-submarine warfare. And I've got many fond memories of being out there, late at night, whether you're at high altitude or, you got the authorization to go down low and fly at 200 or 300 feet. There's nothing like that.
Yeah, certainly. My commissioning source was AOCS. And honestly, I didn't know there was a P3. I was kind of thrown into the Navy quickly, and I knew about jets, and that's what everybody wanted, and I was lucky enough, I guess, to get P3s and really enjoyed it. And I got the old P3s, the P3B mod, and that riding the rail, as they call it, inside those. And but to be on top of a Russian submarine and actually be able to hear things under the water was really a thrill for me. Just being a country boy from Alabama, just to be in charge of a P3 and on top of a Russian submarine, doing ASW was really a thrill and something I'll never forget.
Certainly. We talk about things like crew resource management and all, and there's really no other platform, I think, that really encompasses that. And you put the whole, everything that makes up a crew teamwork type event than tracking a sub as a 11-person crew.
Yeah.
Well, you played football at Navy, so kind of the same concept. You're building a high-performing team, and the crews that really do that well are high-performing teams, and they've got that chemistry amongst them, and they're able to talk things through. They can anticipate, and they know what's coming next. That was probably one of the most significant factors that influenced my decision to stay in. Was I did my first tour in Brunswick, Maine, and I flew on the same crew for over 3 years, and so I grew up with a radar operator, acoustic operators, ordnancemen, pilots, co-pilots, navigators, and I spent more time with them than I did with my family. And so, left there, went to Canada, was instructing, flew with different people every day, and I really missed that crew concept and that, having that extension of family that, I came to know in the community, and, just really loved it.
Admiral, it's funny you say that, because last month I had my old Sensor 3 operator and my old IFT down here visiting me, and we've been close ever since.
Yeah.
We were on my crew for 2 deployments in the Philippines, and you do get close with them. You get real close, especially after 6 months. You come back and you kind of miss them, for a little bit. And but I remember being in my first squadron and being on my first crew, and I flew with them guys for 5 months. And then right before deployment, they called me in and said, okay, we're going to shift you over to another crew. And I was just devastated.
Yeah.
I love these guys. But, it only took a week or so, then you're in with another group. So I flew with 3 separate crews in my time there, and I'm real close with all of them. Yeah. Still maintain a lot of friendships with those guys.
Yeah, the bonding experience of it too. I mean, that's such a big piece of it, especially when you're working together like that, because when you're operating at your highest, highest capability together, the way that the information flows throughout the cockpit, the tube, it's unmatched.
It is a lot of badgering going on too, but most of it was professional.
That's on the Conference 2 network.
That's right. On the Conference 2 network.
The other thing that I don't know if I realized how special it was at the time, but I remember as a brand new lieutenant. So I've been in the Navy for 4.5 years, the skipper saying, okay, you're going to be the plane commander, you're going to be the mission commander. You guys go away and, go fly missions for 2 weeks at a time. And, that's pretty uncommon in the Navy, to be that rank and have that much independence and autonomy to be able to go out and do good things. And, you would go on those detachments and, you would play hard, but you would work hard as well. And I can remember a detachment out of Kinloss over in Scotland. And it was a flippin' James Bond movie. They'd flash the lights, everything was MCON, and you'd do a complete mission without talking to anybody. And it was all through lights and clicks and checking into different things with a double click on your mic. Those are special memories. That when you're a little kid, you watch movies and you see stuff like that, and all of a sudden you're an adult and you're in charge and living that dream.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember being off the coast of the Soviet Union then, tracking submarines, and like you said, Admiral, we were all MCON. You couldn't talk, and I was just a young lieutenant, but I was in charge. I was a mission commander, and I remember sitting back in my seat and actually thinking, "Wow, I can't believe I'm in charge of this."
Yeah.
Really amazing.
Fun stuff. So everybody talks about, the peril of landing on the aircraft carrier at night. But I can remember flying into lodges in the Azores. Certainly I've heard of stories, guys and gals flying in and out of Adak, Alaska. And so for perspective, lodges sits in the Azore Islands out in the middle of the Atlantic. And it sits in, kind of a cupped valley. So probably 1,000-foot cliff on one side goes straight up, and then, 4,000-foot mountains on the other side. And long 10,000-foot Air Force runway. But I can remember coming back and, in a 6-month period, it wasn't uncommon to check in on ATIS and get your weather when you're coming back and hear the winds are extreme, the tower has been abandoned, land at your own risk. It's not uncommon to come in there with a 45-degree crab and kick it out at the very last minute, knowing that, your nearest divert is almost 4 hours away.
Yes.
So again, nothing for a young lieutenant to garner a little confidence than bringing it in with a crew of 11 in conditions like that.
Flying out of ADAC, when we would go and the pilots would go up and do a hop, just a touch and go hop, you'd have to put a navigator on board because the weather could change so quickly. And if you had to go to ADAC, to Anchorage, then you had a navigator on board for you. So it was amazing. I remember going a couple of times and just sitting back there with my nav bag in case something happened. And I remember a few times we actually had to have a pilot in the tower out there when the guys went doing pattern work.
Yeah. Cool memories.
Oh yeah, but you're right. It gets kind of hairy sometimes. Sometimes I was glad I wasn't up front doing that.
It's kind of the same. I think in line of kind of like what you both have said, as a young officer, the things that you're entrusted with and the uniqueness of that on the carrier for at least a multi-crew aircraft, as a nugget NFO, right seater in the S3, you're paired with some of the more senior pilots, at least initially and all. And I think you don't know what you don't know. Kind of landing at night or whatnot. It's all pretty cool. It's all pretty exciting. You do know that you need to cling to the right shirt color or your pilot getting you out to the aircraft when you're walking on that deck. But the more senior you become, the more now you're the one that's flying with the nugget pilot.
Yeah.
And when you got to get on board, and when you see that bolter, red bolter light, you're taking it around, and it's maybe your second or third pass. That can be a little bit concerning. But then again, I'll say, so can a night combat descent into Ali Air Base, P3 or one of those types austere environments that the P3 would operate in. That can be pretty daunting as well.
I don't remember being too frightened when I was a young ensign or JG, and it's because I didn't know enough to be scared. But as I got more senior, you really got concerned sometime about what was going on.
Yeah. It's interesting. You talk about flying into a place like, Kandahar or whatever. As I grew up, I got to see the P3 evolve. And, when we were young, height of the Cold War, there was one mission and only one mission, and that was go find the bad guy sub, locate them, let us know what they're doing, let's make sure we got a good track on them at all times.
Yes.
And as the Soviets turned into the Russians, the Chinese got quiet, the Russians got quiet. The thing that I'm proud of is the way the community evolved. And when I was a JO, the only time you flew over land was when you were coming home. And it was, flying from Port and Maine. Yeah. Everything else was, you were blue water. But, seeing, the installation of new avionics and the ASW improvement program, ASUW improvement program, radars and everything. I can remember being, a commanding officer for the first time, our first flight in country. And, we went downtown Baghdad. And that was another one of those, I can't believe I'm doing this, because you never did that. It was a completely new foreign mission. But I can remember those flights feeling like that Lieutenant JG saying, man, I got to be on top of my game. This is all new. What are we doing? Who are we talking to? What are we able to provide? And it was really cool to see how the community was able to shift that focus to continue to be relevant to the Navy.
Yeah. The term was always the venerable P3 Orion, but I think it's equally so kind of the jack of all trades P3 Orion, or the flexible, the multi-role P3 Orion, because that was what I saw coming from the S3 community, where it was a mini P3 in many aspects, but it didn't have the plug and play capability that the P3 did. And certainly all sorts of generations of MPRA have seen different, working with other services or maybe special design forces and agencies and all. We have that capability. I always thought that was cool. It also was a challenge to get up to speed on that many systems, because I don't know if it's true or not. I heard at one point there was 95 different variants of a P3 that you could have, whether it be your scan pattern, in the cockpit, in the flight station, with where your instruments may be based on being a beam up or an AIP or update 3.
Different software loads.
Loads. Just the amount of stuff that you had to learn. And you're right, sir. The community was very flexible to meet whatever the mission tasking was.
Yeah. So I do have a funny story. When I was a department head, I was an East Coast guy up until that point, turned into a West Point guy at a Barber's Point, and we deployed to Diego Garcia. We had a detachment in Masir, Oman. Masir, Oman's a tiny little island with nothing there. The Omani Air Force has a couple airplanes, and they fly in and out of there. So I get there, and I flew the first couple months as a mission commander, and then I got tapped on the shoulder. They said, you're going to be the officer in charge of Masira. So I go to Masira, and probably my best friend in the Navy. We'd gone through flight school together. We were roommates in El Centro doing primary flight training while the Blues were out there, and then we were shooters together on the Kitty Hawk. Well, he was the current OIC, and so we had gone out, and you eat in a little mess, and there's a little private mess bar there as well. So had a couple cocktails that night, went back to the OIC room, and we were in the room and chipping a few golf balls, and he hit an errant shot, and it broke the OIC's TV. And so it's late at night, and we said, you know what, the skipper is never here. So we shuttled across, and the rooms were designed in a wadi, so a big square compound. So we trundled across the sand, went over into the skipper's room, everything was unlocked, plugged that TV in, took the good TV, took it over. And for the rest of the deployment, I'm the OIC. The skipper comes to town for a couple of nights. He goes, hey, my TV's not working. I said, I don't know what to tell you, skipper. We'll take a look at it, but no big repair facilities. So flash forward several years, and they say what goes around comes around. I'm the CEO of a squadron, and I did my first detachment to Masir, Oman, went into the CO's room, turned on the TV. I'll be darned, TV was still broken. So
It's probably the same one.
could be.
I will tell a story, and this is about my crew mostly. We were flying out of Barber's Point. I was a VP-22 there, and there was a Russian submarine out that we were getting sniffs on, but they just could not localize this guy. And so they briefed us and my crew. I remember it was a Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, real early. They sent us out, and we had to go about 4 hours to get on station. And to make a long story short, working with the great AWs that I had, we actually localized the sky. It took the whole 4 hours, but they had been trying to localize the sky for days. And we called back that we had localized him, but the other crew came down and to relieve us. And I was just a young lieutenant at the time, and I didn't think that much of it, and got back, and our skipper was waiting with a big case of beer for the whole crew. And for some reason, that has always just stood out in my mind as just one of my most memorable times in the squadron.
You know, it's interesting you bring that up because, and again, as a community, I think we all really embrace the work hard, play hard. You know, anytime you would do a cross country, you'd fly somewhere and the duty officer was there with a big cooler of beer for you.
Yeah.
And that kind of dried up over time, I remember. But when we were in Keflavik, Iceland for my very first deployment, so finished the RAG, went right out. And again, my very first operational flight was on a Soviet Victor III. Well, every week, the duty crew, we had a bar there called the Brass Nut, and the duty crew would host a party, and it would be a themed party. And I can remember one week, you know, it was probably November, so it was cold outside and everything. But as the duty crew, we went over and said, hey, we're going to do a Caddyshack party. And so with Caddyshack, with a golf theme, we needed some sod. And the only place to find sod was on the base commander, who was an Air Force 1-star, in his yard. And so we went over and covertly shifted some sod from his yard into the Brass Nut. We had sod on top of the bar. We had sod replacing the carpet and everything. And we had such a great time until we were standing in his office the next day explaining. And, you know, then we became horticulturists and we had to replant all that stuff so he wouldn't put us in hack. But, you know, it really was a work hard, play hard. And, you know, I can go down the list. As a matter of fact, this summer, you know, we've got a good friend in town, Don Warenberg, who, you know, was in VP-23 with us. He got out and, you know, flew for the airlines, but, you know, we still have such a strong network that, you know, during the summer air show, we're going to have a, you know, mini reunion and bring some of those guys back together and tell stories and lies and see who can remember truth from fiction.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I've stood in front of the skipper's desk a time or two, you know, with things that my crew had done, but he I don't know, in a way you could kind of tell he understood, and nothing really bad came of it, but he had to rip me over it. So another good memory.
Yeah, yeah.
I have one, I think, that kind of speaks to, you know, just talking about the varying roles, because it was such a unique one. You know, Admiral, you may recall that, you know, I'm curious where you were about 2008 timeframe. That was when I initially showed up to the squadron. One of the opportunities I had to upgrade to becoming a tactical coordinator was down in El Salvador doing the JADF South mission. So Joint Interagency Task Force South was a, you know, anti-drug kind of focused mission, augmenting Coast Guard and joint forces, seizing, you know, various illicit drug smuggling routes. So what I found that to be was, one, you're deployed to El Salvador. So
living in a hotel.
It was arduous, sir.
Yeah.
In a hotel with per diem. It was tough, but someone had to do it. But the tasking, you know, could be a challenge, because sometimes it could be, you know, hintings or just a sniff of something that you'd have to go and investigate. And at the time, this is, you know, Red Stripe. So we're, as a you know, inventory of P3 aircraft, we're hurting. Getting past that, making sure that the bulk of the most capable assets are going forward to Fifth Fleet, to where most of the conflict was. So these are some of the oldest aircraft that were modified for this mission. And we go down with our tasking. I think we were launched on an alert flight of all things. So, you know, had a certain amount of time you had to be up on the aircraft. You know, the flight engineers and the you know, the IFTs had everything up and running. You know, so you show up, brief it up on board, and we're launching. And our tasking was to meet up with Pedro down in some area completely down to like the south and west. I almost got to, I think, to the point where we were going to go to into JADF West type tasking. And we're down there with our only instructions of getting on the radio and, you know, on guard and finding Pedro, who's going to give us this info. And the only thing we saw, if Pedro was anything, we found a fishing vessel with our camera on them, and Pedro is on the side of the boat using the restroom. Probably the worst case you can imagine. And we thought, oh my God, what, you know, we need to get the camera off that first off. I don't know that that's our tasking. But the cool part of that story is that you know, you'd have these missions where we called it going out and mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of like, just that presence, just ever present, making sure that we're out there. But that day it also turned into emergent tasking where we got pulled into the Caribbean now, or towards the Caribbean in the Gulf. And we ended up finding a drug runner, one of the go fasters, and that flight ends with, you know, we're down at 200 feet below a cloud layer and tracking this guy, pass him on to Coast Guard authorities that made an interdiction. And in the process, we're getting shot at with this, you know, folks on a shotgun. We're getting it on camera. And you know, just building that footage, and it led to some, you know, drug seizure. I'd be guessing if I knew what amount, but it was cool to go and have just this kind of like funny, just off the wall mission to where it turned very serious, and then ended up being in a, you know, a seizure that, you know, you could kind of feel good about. You know, you felt accomplished, and it was nice to have those little victories with missions like that, where it was this long kind of, what am I out here doing? And then to get that feedback, it was definitely a win.
And that instant gratification, I can remember, you know, flying search and rescue missions, and you know, you talk about mowing the lawn, but you know, you finally get to one, and you know, we had done, we were all night up in Afghanistan, so you're driving back up and down the road. We were at minimum fuel, and we got the, hey, we need you to go down south, and so you know, we shut down 2 engines. We're down there, and you know, we had very specific direction. There was a big freighter that was taking on water. By the time we got there, and you know, it was probably moderate to severe turbulence. It was so bad, and we're down there. We had to strap everybody in their seats. We're trying to get pictures, and you know, the boat was at a point where, you know, the stern was up in the air, and there were people on the back rail getting to jump in. But you know, to be able to vector somebody in, to be able to, you know, get all those good things going on, make sure you were saving lives, and you know, getting back and land, and you feel like you've just, you know, been the hero of the world. We were supporting, you know, troops in contact up over Afghanistan. A couple hours later, we're down south saving lives, and immediately upon landing, you know, I get a phone call. Hey, need to find out who the mission commander on that flight was. And I said, okay, what's going on? Well, Fifth Fleet wanted digital pictures of this for a CNN article. This was big media presence. And I said, well, I'll give you what we got, but I mean, we couldn't even stand up in the cockpit. We couldn't do this, that, and the other. And he said, okay, well, the Fifth Fleet N3 wants us to whoever the mission commander was. I said, well, okay, well, that was me, Commander Cozad, the CEO of VP-40. And I guess I was technically fired for about 30 minutes, and then they put me back in the game. So with the good comes the bad.
Wow. You know, being a P3 guy, I tell people this, I spent 20 years in the Navy, and I never stepped foot on a ship. And I was on a ship once at Pearl Harbor for a meeting, and with the sub skipper going out on an exercise the next week. And so I took my crew out as I was briefed, went out to where we were supposed to be. We were going to track this American submarine. He was nowhere to be found. Never found him. Never got a sniff of him. So went back to the debrief the following week. I said, hey, we were there. He says, we were too. I said, I didn't see you. He said, I saw you, and he threw me a picture. Gave me a picture that he took of me as we flew over, and I've still got that. So it kind of gave you a little bit of appreciation of you know, how good our guys really are. We were really trying. We were really trying to find him.
It does give you that confidence that, you know, we talk about like a strategic advantage that we have, or competitive advantage that we have.
Yeah,
certainly.
As we were talking earlier, I'm a firm believer, and I don't know, Admiral, if you'll agree with this or not, but we were tracking submarines, and you would lose a submarine for a little while, and then after a little bit, you would get him back. And I've often wondered, they were probably collecting as much intel on us as them.
Yeah, no doubt.
I used to think, you're doing a good job, you got him back, but I think maybe he wanted to be gotten back.
Yeah, you're right. It is a game of cat and mouse. You talk about appreciation. So, you know, I finished my second tour, so I went up to Canada and was an exchange pilot for the Canadian Air Force. And, you know, the next assignment traditionally is your dissociated sea tour. And, you know, I wanted to be a shooter. I wanted to be on the flight deck. You know, I wanted to really see what made the carrier tick. And so I got to spend 2 years on the Kitty Hawk out of San Diego. And, you know, you talk about that nugget who's looking for the right color shirt to hang on to get back and forth. I mean, within weeks, here I am, ducking under, nacelles, scooting around the flight deck like I've been there forever as a P3 guy, and within 6 months, you're literally running the flight deck. And the thing that still is just fascinating, as a land-based P3 guy is, the volume of work and the importance and the responsibility that we give 19, 20, 25-year-old kids on the flight deck wearing yellow, green, blue, orange shirts out there making things happen on a daily basis, that have no fear, that are totally professional in everything that they do. And I'll never forget those 2 years.
Well, those young kids, they go home and they talk to their friends about it, but you really can't explain that and describe that to anybody without experiencing it.
Yeah, seeing is believing.
It is. It is.
I'm super satisfied with what we got here. Is there any other thing that you guys, that's occurred to you while you're sitting here that you?
I mean, another thing I think about with the community that I kind of always admired or been really impressed by beyond just, and it goes beyond the aircraft and kind of the tactical side, is how well the community has managed its people and putting them in strategic roles. You look at the office of the Secretary of the Navy, the CNO, we're very well placed, I think, as a community. I think that we have a lot of strategic thinkers that do a tremendous job when it comes to, whether that's from the Millington side of the house with the personnel, management and everything that goes into career management, and as well as you, sir. That was one thing that I always saw the P3 community get. I mean, where we fall in with whether it's flags or representation at that level, I'm not really sure, but I've always thought we've really had a very good strategic hold and a really good job of putting people in other places in the Navy that they could succeed and make a contribution.
Yes.
Yeah. I can tell you that the Navy / the community didn't always send me where I want to go. As a matter of fact, I've got a son who's class of 14, and I tell him frequently that I never got my first choice of orders. I wanted to fly C-130s and be a TACAMO guy out of flight school. Didn't get that. I ended up being a P3 guy. Wanted to go to this base, didn't get to go to that base. And throughout my career, I mean, when I was a captain, I was the executive assistant for the 2-star in Millington. And I had just screened for Major Command. And somebody told me, hey man, if you need an insurance marker to get your number one choice, you're in the right place. Guess what? I didn't get my number one choice. But somebody had mentioned something earlier. You bloom where you're planted, and you go there, and you just look to make a difference. You look to get involved in the community and the squadron, have a fun time, and it's a work hard, play hard game, and that's probably the reason I did it for 35 years. When I thought I'd do it for about 8 years.
Well, it was when I went in the Navy, sir. I didn't know how long I would stay. It was a yearly thing, but once you hit that 8-10 year mark, it just kind of keeps going and goes very fast. And then there you are at the end of your career. Same thing when I taught junior ROTC. I said, I don't know, I might do this in 2 or 3 years, and then 16 years later, I'm still sitting there. So it's the Navy was a wonderful part of my life, and I was so proud to wear that Navy uniform for really 36 years.
As I, approached that point, of hanging it up, I look back on it, it was the people all along and the opportunities that you're provided that keep you there, without a doubt. That's what it's about, having that, just following along, and like you said, bloom where you're planted. I'm fortunate enough that Admiral Patrick Walsh will be speaking at my retirement, and has said that, my story goes back to him, that early on in my career, I had the opportunity to have a little info call with him, and I'm expressing my plight in life and where I am and not getting that first choice. I too fall in that place. But he said something to me that was really, I thought impactful on where I went for the rest of my career. He just said that no matter where he went, he just tried to be the best at that, make the squadron better and do it to the best of his ability. And for me, it was kind of a wake up call, a little bit of growing up. And just put my best foot forward.
Yeah. Whenever anybody complains about assignments and orders, I always tell them a story. So we had, so I was a baby 1-star at the time, and we had just become empty nesters. My youngest was at the Naval Academy, and my wife came in and she said, you know what, for the first time, let's go overseas. Let's really try to go overseas and do something and, you know, get immersed in culture. And I said, all right, let's do it. And so I got a call from Bill Moran, who was the Chief of Naval Personnel at the time. And he said, I've got 2 choices for you. And he said, but really, I've already made up my mind. Here's where you're going to go. And Amy's going to go with you. It'll be a 1-year assignment. So on the way home, I stopped at the package store, bought a bottle of champagne, thought again, and I bought a second bottle of champagne and went home. And I said, sweetheart, I've got good news. Let me pour you a drink. So she had a glass of champagne. I said, we are going overseas. She said, oh, that's great. She's thinking Belgium. She's thinking, you know, Norway. We're going to go to the UK. This is going to be awesome. I said, no, it's an island we're going to go to. She's thinking and thinking and thinking. And then I poured her a second glass of wine. I said, we're going to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba for a year. And she said, I thought you said overseas. I said, well, technically it's the Caribbean Sea. And so, you know, with that, again, a tour that I will never forget, a tour that was super satisfying, probably one of the toughest things I've ever done. But you know, you go where you're planted, you make a difference for your people, they make a difference for you, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you something, John. I still remember the very last time I took off my Navy uniform. To this day, I remember the last time I took it off. So hopefully you will too.
I absolutely will.
It was kind of an emotional time, really.
Sure, I'm getting that sense. It's going to be hard to keep it together.
It is. It will be. Good luck to you.
Thank you.